Welcome to this edition of Let's Chat. I'm Dr. Diana Bitner at True Women's Health, and I'm so honored tonight to have a guest, Vonnie Woodrick, and I'll introduce her a bit more in a second. But I first want to start with my why. At True, our goal is to help every woman live her truth. And what I've learned over the years in taking care of women for over 25 years is that every woman has hard. Every woman has a pain point. Every woman has something. It might be mental, it might be physical, it might be interrelationship. It might be have to do with her relationships. It may be old traumas due to old relationships. But no matter what it is, we have to talk about it to get it out in the open and help women live their truth. So, in having said that, I am so honored to have Vonnie Woodrick here tonight. She's a life coach and she's had personal experience that she's willing to share with us tonight. This conversation tonight will be powerful. It will give you language to talk about mental health in new ways. I've learned so much from Vonnie already in our several brief conversations, and I look forward to moving forward in this. So, Vonnie, welcome. I've talked about my why. Would you mind sharing your why? Why are you here with us tonight?
Thank you, Dr. Bitner. Well, first of all, I just appreciate you and your willingness to bring this conversation to the forefront and recognize mental health being just as important as physical health. And that really is why my why is we need to talk about mental health challenges, suicide, and bring the conversation to the forefront for change. And I have a passion to change the conversation, change the narrative, and that's why I'm here. And thank you for allowing me to do so.
Oh, my pleasure. And I do want to say to those of you in the audience live, please feel free to put in your questions. You'll see in the chat bar, there's opportunity for that. And I would bring that up. And if we have a question that we want to make sure we get to, then we'll have it up on the screen so we can address that. So everyone, please feel free to put your questions in the sidebar. So again, I'm so honored to have Vonnie. And the thing I would want to start with is, why do you care about mental health? What brought this up for you?
After losing my husband to depression 17 years ago, it was so misunderstood, and we talked about it in a very, I think, disrespectful way. And it took me all of these years to really understand that people would ask the question, why did your husband kill himself? Why did he? That was so selfish. That was so, he was insane, and all of these things that weren't accurate. And so with my own personal experience of losing Rob, having him be fourth generation suicide, something that we really didn't talk about. I had great concern for the fifth, my own kids, the sixth, my grandchildren, and beyond. So to me, the conversation of change is very logical, but yet we still talk about it in a very dark and scary way.
Well, even before we came on, I shared that I've taken care of some patients who have tried to take their own life, and thankfully were not successful. And I used the old language, and I was so glad that you were able to correct me, because I think it brings it into a different light versus an act versus the result of an illness that has treatment and has causes and has. So I love how you talk about that. And I mean, that's how this started, right? Is changing that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'll share the word that you used. She tried to commit suicide. Up until 1964, suicide was deemed a crime, and that's really where commit comes into play with suicide. My husband didn't commit a crime. My husband had an illness. I didn't know that depression and anxiety had a deadly side effect, and that the side effect is suicide. Suicide is a side effect of a mental health illness or pain. Pain comes from so many different places other than a mental health illness, such as bullying, financial loss, devastation, isolation, the flu, worrying. All of these things cause pain that brings suicidal thoughts and sometimes suicidal actions. So if we don't start adding pain and recognizing mental health illnesses, brain health illnesses as illnesses, we're never going to get anywhere. We're going to look at, well, suicide is a choice. Well, you know what? Suicide isn't a choice, because depression is not a choice. And over 90% of those that die by suicide have some form of diagnosed or undiagnosed depression. So we are talking and dealing with an illness. So it's really important to get to, as I like to say, dissect that pain of where that depression is coming from so we can get the help and support that we need.
And I love to talk about unpacking. We like to unpack that suitcase of depression and anxiety. And all the things you said brought up so many thoughts. You were talking about sources of pain. And as a physician who specializes in midlife and menopause, I remember the first time that I really started to have a sense of the relationship between hormones and mental health is taking care of women who had gone through postpartum depression. And I had a patient who, after she had her baby, that she had infertility, she wanted this child so badly. And once she delivered this baby, she was so afraid to be left alone with this child that she would hurt the child. She had such anxiety. I get shivers remembering it. She had such anxiety about being left alone. She couldn't be left alone with this child. And we were able to get her help. It was still, it was 28 years ago, and it was a real challenge to get mental health providers that would understand. And now we have, thankfully, in Grand Rapids, we have Pine Rest has an outpatient and an inpatient unit that specialize in postpartum depression. I take care of a lot of women with PMS, or we call it PMDD. So they have, as their estrogen drops before a period, there's significant increase in anxiety and depression. Women in perimenopause and menopause. And, when women have postpartum depression and have PMS, then they're at much higher risk to have significant depression and anxiety as they get to menopause. And again, I've taken care of patients who their anxiety and depression hits such a crescendo around menopause that potentially suicide could have been a result of that anxiety.
Yeah, you bring up such good points, right? Because you're showing that postpartum depression, women don't choose that, right? That has to do with hormone levels. That's hormone levels. But yet so many people with anxiety and depression or whatever pain that they're feeling, they don't want to reach out. They don't want to talk about it. They feel like a failure. How can I not love my child? When it
shame
really has nothing to do with that.
Exactly. And the shame is just crazy. And, when we talk about, a formula that you can think about is that when you don't sleep, you don't make your brain chemicals. And genetically, some people, some families just don't make enough brain chemicals. And on the other side of that equation is that if you have lots of life events, such as a newborn baby and maybe not great support from your people, and at the same time, your estrogen went from 600 to 0 in 2 minutes when that baby came out. And so when all that comes together, so to your point, there's so many sources of significant anxiety and depression. And again, also how you and I talk about it is like brain chemicals like insulin, in the sense of is that we don't shame people with diabetes, right?
Right. Well, and people with diabetes or people with cancer, they don't commit cancer. Right?
No.
But I think something really important that I just thought of right now too is that, when we treat depression, anxiety as illnesses, we need to treat them in that same way as if it was someone that had cancer, right? We talk about it as a family. We understand that this isn't an illness. We understand that there's treatment options, that we go to the doctor, we get treatment. Perhaps we have to take medication. Perhaps we have to go to therapy or some type of rehab. Right. And then we go to follow-up appointments. So often with anxiety and mental health, we don't do that. We sweep them under the rug. Our family, our own family members, like, just, you'll get over it. Oh, you get over it. Just, and that's so disrespectful to the illness. But sadly, and I hate to say this, is that all illnesses are treatable, preventable, but yet they can also be terminal. And I truly believe that I lost my husband to a terminal illness. There was nothing more that we could have done. We tried. He was on medication. He was a healthy eater. We did everything that we could. If I knew now what I knew today, I don't know if I knew then what I know today, right, would things be different? Would there be other treatment options? He was a successful businessman. However, there's guilt admitting that he had anxiety issues. He didn't want people to know. He didn't want to be judged in his work. So I think that's just important to know that with all illnesses, some people live and sadly, some people die.
I'm just looking at a question from Kelly. Kelly, thank you so much for sharing. And this is a lot that you've got to take in. The fact that you have ERPR receptors is, forgive me for saying this way, is a good thing in the sense that your cancer is likely very treatable. Thank goodness. I just got shivers. It's very likely that you will do well. You will survive this cancer. At 52, you've had lots of estrogen in your brain for a long time. It's helped your heart and your bones. So in terms of supporting your mental health, it's about, thank you for, you're talking about it already, which I think is a big part of it. And there are so many of us that understand the journey through breast cancer treatment, the journey afterwards in breast cancer survivorship. And with the loss of estrogen, there'll definitely be an effect on your brain chemicals. And whether you see us at True, whether you see, just make sure that you've got providers who understand and can talk about what you're going through with you and offer you options to feel better. So in recovering from surgery, we're going to talk about it in the tips a little bit, but it's about self-care. And again, I love how you're honoring this. Vonnie, what would you add to this for Kelly's question?
I just want to say I'm happy that the news that it's very treatable and that you're going to be okay. But I feel that your support system is crucial to you. And sometimes that is in our family, like I said earlier. I'm sure there's other cancer survivors. I'm sure there's other groups, and I highly recommend getting with a group that can support you and what you're going through and understand what you're going through.
Thank you. At True, we have a cancer wellness program. And last night, Suzanne Pettigrew, who's our PA, she and I led a support group at Gilda's Club for breast cancer survivors. And some women were still in active treatment. And Gilda's Club is just such a wonderful local organization. And the group, we were on for an hour and a half last night on Zoom and just had a wonderful time. Everyone sharing. It was hard. Like there were tears and, it was hard. But I think, afterwards, people were really feeling supported. And, I think it's, not to give an illness too much power, but yet enough power that we talk about it and we treat it, but not too much power to take away our truth, our personality, our spark. And then sometimes it's okay just to have a bad day. But to still rest in being supportive, have people to call. And I would share with you, I've got Vonnie's book right here. I ordered it the minute I started to talk to Vonnie about this, and I read it this weekend. Oh, sorry, upside down. And so I read the book this weekend, and it's a quick read in the sense as I just inhaled it once I started. I thought, I'll just look at it for a minute and I'll come back to it. Oh no, I just stayed and just inhaled it. And Vonnie, I can't thank you enough. You did an awesome job. I'll never forget. And I want to talk more about the book, but I'll never forget as an young OB doctor, I had never experienced postpartum depression. And I found Brooke Shields' book on postpartum depression, and her experience through postpartum depression is so helpful to give me language to talk to patients, to share her book with them, to maybe once they were through the worst of it, but to share their book with their family members so that their family members could understand. And I want to have some of these at True so we can share. We have a library that's growing at True. So I can't thank you enough for this book. Tell me what made you write this book.
I really appreciate the support and for taking the time to read it, because I truly hope, whether you have lost someone to suicide or not, that you read the book. Because I wrote the book because once I started sharing my story, more and more people wanted to hear it. There's such a lonely feeling to when you lose someone to suicide and you don't have people that understand, that you go to the grocery store and you hear people whispering, oh, her husband is the one that killed himself, or point fingers and whisper, and you just know. And in the book I talk about the turtle syndrome, and it was real. I slowly would peek my head out and start going out into the real world until that would happen, and having a daughter that was 5 years old, and having the gym teacher say, okay, students, everyone go out and go for a walk with their dad tonight. And one of her classmates raised her hand and said, but Maddie doesn't have a dad. How do you respond to those things? So for me, it was about sharing my story, because once I did, I found out I wasn't alone. I found out that so many of us have stories. We have stories of loss. We have stories of pain. And once we start to share, it doesn't matter how different our lives or our stories are. When we lose someone to suicide, we still have those same feelings of guilt, maybe shame, of misunderstanding, of devastation. And I want to provide hope. I want to provide compassion. And I want, at the end, my kids each write a letter. I want people to know that life can move forward. And
Right.
it doesn't mean that we have forgotten about Rob. If anything, he's with us every day, helping us through this journey. And I want you to know that your loved one is too.
Well, and that's one thing that I think is so powerful, is that we want to honor Rob. We want to talk about Rob. We want to remember Rob. Like it's not, it's again, it's like any other illness that has lethal consequences. That again, it wasn't his choice. It wasn't his fault. It was that we want to honor and remember all of that. And again, I love how you're again able to share this. And the other thing that comes up for me is there's been many studies done about people who cope well. And Vonnie, I would say, now meeting you, I would say you're the picture of how someone copes. And maybe early on, I know from the book, it wasn't as easy. And when we study people who cope well, they seem to do three things well consistently. Number one, they believe they deserve to be happy. And I believe you believe that you deserve to be happy. Number two, and maybe we don't always feel that, but again, if that's a belief we want to foster. Number two is we keep a support network around us. And maybe it's a small network or it's a larger network. And it's a network of maybe professionals and friends and dear friends that are old friends, but that know us well. And number three, we ask for help when we need it. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, those are the three pillars of people who cope well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that those are definitely spot on. And for me, I did not want Rob to be defined by how he died. He was so much more than how he died. And sadly, that's what people focus on. That's what people still talk about. So for me, those pillars, building, creating I Understand has given me a family that I never even thought would be possible that I have. I mean, we have such a great group of people that support each other, love each other unconditionally. And it's really hard when you become a widow at the age of 39, your friends, they don't invite you anymore as couples. I mean, your whole world. Not only did I lose my husband and some family members, and I lost friends that we did things as couples. I no longer had the business. I had three kids to raise, so somebody else takes over the business, leaving me feeling very, very alone. So that community support, wherever that community support is crucial to your healing.
And I think no matter what it is, when there's something, I'm divorced. I've felt some of that. I have a patient who has breast cancer at 34, and she said, I'm going through menopause at 34, and none of my friends, they don't even, of course, why would they know what that means? And she feels so alone in having a hot flash, and the rest of her friends are having periods. And so, to your point, whatever that situation is, one of the things we really want to do at True is create community, around whatever it is that's hard for us, if it's sexual dysfunction. So again, I thank you. Vonnie, at the end of this conversation, what do you hope that people will take away from our conversation?
I hope that they take away the importance of whole body, whole health, and that is treating your mental health and your physical health, because they both go hand in hand. Anything that you do that's great for your physical health is going to be good for your mental health. But for me and my passion, what I really want you to do is join me in the definition petition that I have on my website. Join me in changing the conversation. Join me in living a judgment and stigma-free life. Let's accept everybody for who they are, whether it's the color of their skin, the color of the hair, the car that they drive, what illness that they or their family may be facing. We need each other. We need to do this together. And I understand, would love to have you as a part of our community so we can grow and build this judgment-free community right here in West Michigan.
I just love that. And we say it true all the time, is that we want to meet people where they are. And, I might have an idea for what I hope they take away from the visit, but it always turns around to and then it's just perfect for what they need it to be. So it's, again, to your point, out in the community, someone might look like $1 million and have an expensive suit on. It doesn't matter. Like, everybody's got something and everybody has their own experience. We don't know what they're going through or what their point of pain is. Is there anything, again, very specific that you would want to make sure we take away in terms of certain language? And you've talked about that a little bit, but I know language, as Susan Thomas said, words are so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And so how else can you help us with that language around this?
Well, let me give you an example.
Please.
So let's say you asked me how my husband died. And I said, he killed himself. How do you react? What do you say? How do you respond? You will probably then ask the most commonly asked question after we lose someone to suicide. How did he do it?
Yeah, like that's any of my business.
Yeah. So, well, but then, nobody thinks about what that does to me. That triggers me and takes me back to my moment of trauma where I discovered that I had PTSD from that experience. And to this day, 17 years later, I still have a hard time opening a closed white door, so let's change it. What if we started talking about the illness rather than the act? So if you asked me how my husband died and I answered, he died of depression, what type of conversation can we have? We can talk about the illness rather than the act. We can talk about the signs and the symptoms and what we should do for treatment. But we can, most importantly, recognize that depression can have a deadly side effect, and that side effect is suicide.
Is there anything you would want to share about, in the book, of course, it was very, very poignant, but do you want to talk about the moment? And also, where I would like you to talk about this as well, is a lot of us are afraid to talk to people. We might be thinking someone has a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression, and we're afraid to bring up the word. Have you thought of hurting yourself? Because what if that increases the risk that they're going to do it? Or, how do I, like so many of us, especially in healthcare, how do I bring up that conversation?
Yeah. Well, the biggest myth that surrounds suicide is, I can't ask because that's going to put the idea into their head. I mean, and that totally is a myth. I mean, studies have shown that when we ask someone, are you okay? Are you suicidal? Do you have a plan? That almost brings a sense of relief to the person. Somebody cares. I can get this off my chest. I don't have to think about it anymore. So as far as the moment, the night before, Rob was really struggling with anxiety and depression. And the night before he went into the hospital for 4 days before he died, he said to me, I could never, because I asked that question, and he said, I could never do that to you and the kids. So suicide was the furthest thing from my mind, because he told me that he wouldn't do that. So I really struggled with that. And I found that that is one of the most common struggles in our support groups, that the same thing. Well, I could never do that. Well, I had a friend of mine, her name is Tara Lipinski, Olympic champion, NBC News commentator. And she's in the book. And I just recently, since I started the book, has been using her name with it, because she called me about a month after Rob died, and we were talking, and I said, I just don't understand why he said he couldn't do that, but yet he did. And she said, well, I can explain that. And 3 words, the moment changed. She goes, that night, he couldn't do that, Vonnie. But someone that struggles with anxiety and depression, you wake up in the morning and all of those fears start coming back to you. And one of the most commonly used words too is that our loved ones feel as if they are a burden to their family. And if I could have only told Rob that our life with him is much better than without him. And that word burden is just used so often, and that's not true. And we've kind of come to this conclusion in our support group, is that they felt like they were a burden to us, and they didn't want to burden us anymore. And in our language and how we see it, we see that this was an act of love from them, even though we are and would be so much better with them here. It is so much harder going through the loss and the grief and watching kids grow up without their dad and having the comments than if he was here.
No, I hear you, and thank you so much for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
You talk also about the power of journaling. I've journaled since I could write, so tell me about how journaling helped you and what you might advise people around that.
Back when 17 years ago, almost 18 years ago, when I lost my husband, I was devastated, confused. I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't keep thoughts together and straight. And I found that one thing that really helped me was quotes, and in the book, there's a quote in front of every chapter. And I started writing this, all of this book is from my journal, well, most of it, until we get into the I understand stuff. But if I didn't have my journal, and if I didn't write these things, I think I would still be stuck, because there's something, it's just expressing those feelings.
It just flows.
It does. And when you speak from the heart and it's all coming from your truth and your heart, you can go back even a week later or 2 weeks later and a year later, and you can look, wow, look at how far I've come.
And but look also, at the insight that I had, right?
Yeah. And like I wrote about, the first time that I laughed without guilt, because how could I laugh? How could I laugh? I didn't want people to see me laughing, because what did I have to laugh about? So
it showed that you were still alive, and you still, it was the start of
yeah.
How did you describe it? I don't want to put words into your mouth. How you described that when you laughed for the first time?
Yeah, I just remember, I remember that specific event in my life. And I remember laughing out loud, and just the first time, it was just a funny situation that happened at our cottage, and I laughed and I caught myself, and I'm like, you know what? This felt good, and I don't have to feel guilty about it.
I love that. Thank you. And Janelle, thank you for sharing your story. Vonnie, how would you?
Let's see.
Just about our loved ones feeling like they're a burden. It says, yes, my grandson left a video and he said exactly that. He said, it will be better when he's gone. He said he was making it better. So again, to your point, Janelle's grandson, it was an act of love in his mind.
Yeah. I have chills when I'm reading it, because that the feelings of despair and the feeling of really us being better off without you, is really, really hard for us to comprehend. But that's where their mind went. And it's so hard to be in that place of, well, now I have to accept it, and this is what happened. But I do think that it shows love. It shows love for the family. It shows love. And that's definitely not saying that there isn't so much more pain when that happens. I mean, the pain definitely outweighs, and it's moving away from that mentality to think that we would be better off without you. Because I am telling, if anybody's struggling here right now, we are not better off without you. Your loved one needs you and wants you here.
I'd really love you to answer Judy's question. Hi, Judy. I still miss you 30 years later after OB at North Ottawa. But Judy asks, how can we change the stigma? Why do those who struggle have to struggle in silence? Because it's so misunderstood.
You know what, Judy? I love that question. And you know what? That is my passion. We can change the stigma simply by changing the conversation, by correcting people when they use the word kill, when they start asking about how instead of why. Check out the definition petition and read it, so you can understand the best way that we can talk about mental health, brain health, illnesses as illnesses. And then we can start having compassion and understanding versus all of the judgment and angst and stigma that goes along with mental health.
And I just love how you talk about it. It's not a choice. In that moment, Rob there was no choice.
Right.
Like he didn't choose it. A woman with postpartum depression doesn't choose it. I just was thinking of a patient of mine who was 20. She was in menopause since she was 15. She had cancer, had radiation to the pelvis, killed her ovaries, put her in menopause at 15. And I saw her, and we were able to get her on estrogen and Lexapro, which really helps the brain chemical, which can lead to depression. She did well. Then she lost her insurance. She went off both medicines, and she was this close. And she was thankfully, Vonnie, what do I say? Caught in the moment, like she was rescued. As
you know
she
what?
was,
Yeah.
How do I say that?
I think that she, so she didn't end up, because you know what? She fought against the illness. We all, whatever illness we have to fight against it. And we have to fight against it with every weapon that we have.
Yeah.
And that is our own mind. That is our diet. That is meditation. That is taking care of ourselves. That is therapy. That is treatment. That is medication. All of those things.
All of those things. And I'm just so honored that she made it back to the clinic. And we were able to get her back on her estrogen, back on her Lexapro, counseling support.
Yeah.
We called her every day, and she's doing great. And truly, for her, it was an illness related to her early menopause. She had a lot of family issues, cancer at 15, all that she went through. It was a lot, but it was an illness, and it was treatable, and she's doing well. She's back in school, and, honored to be a part of her story. And I see now we're already at 7:00. What I'd love to move into is something that we always do with our Let's Chat. And number one is the 5 tips that we'd like to leave people with tonight. And we'll kind of talk through each one of these tips. So these are 5 tips that Vonnie and I put together to, again, offer you something to leave with, leave this conversation with. So tip number 1 is know that hormones and brain chemicals have a close relationship. And so in terms of, I know about women's health, I don't know as much about men's health, but in terms of women's health, again, the loss of estrogen with menopause, with early menopause due to cancer treatment, right before a period, after a delivery, when someone's postpartum, the estrogen and, for example, serotonin in a brain are very closely related. And when our estrogen goes down, we go through brain chemical quicker. And so kind of a subtle early change might be you don't feel like engaging in your normal activities. There might be more anxiety about things that normally wouldn't bother you. You're yelling at someone in traffic, and then it moves into you can't focus, you can't concentrate. And so it's recognizing those early signs and saying, again, asking your network for help. Vonnie, I don't know what you might want to add to that one, but honoring that it's an illness with a cause.
I think you got it.
Cool. Number 2. Tip number 2. Vonnie, do you want to talk about this?
Danger signs for mental health: withdrawing, not doing things normally like you do, growing irritability, falling behind at work, school, etc. These are all warning signs. And it's so hard right now being in isolation. I don't know how all of you moms out there that have to work from home, that have your kids. I mean, I was in a meeting the other day, and the lady's like, wait, I have to go put fish sticks in the oven for my kids, And it really is about giving each other grace and understanding. We all have full plates. We all have help, but talk to someone. The best thing that you can do is take care of you. You have to be your own advocate for yourself. And I know as women, we are always on the back burner. Put yourself on the front burner and take care of you and do what you need to do to release those symptoms of mental health warnings.
Right. I remember years ago, my kids were all small. I was working, 110, 120 hours a week, driving an hour each way to work. My husband was traveling. My nanny was in California, my aunt, and it was so much. I wasn't just, not yelling at the kids. I was staring at the wall. And thankfully, I had a support group. I was able to, pull back from work and work a day less. But I didn't want to work less than my male partners. I didn't want to say, this is too much for me to handle. I'm a surgeon. I want to handle it all. But I really had to to honor that and pull back and make changes, or it wasn't going to be okay. So, I hear you. And these are the signs that things might be coming. So let's catch it before it progresses. So, tip number 3. Vonnie, I love how you talk about this. Mental health is just like physical health, and one affects the other. Even like women who have depression have a higher rate of heart disease. Women who have depression have a higher risk of obesity and depression. Women with diabetes have a higher risk of depression. So it's so related. And I love, Vonnie, how you talk about this, that this is part of how we can change the language.
Mm-hmm. I just want to add, since it is February and it is Heart Health Month, and you just said it, Dr. Bitner, that our physical health affects our mental health affects our physical health, and stress. I suffered from a stress-induced heart attack called the cardiomyopathy. And if you are, whether you're a single parent or not a single parent, and you're juggling so many things, there's warning signs for that too. Pressure on your chest. Go to ER, check it out. I mean, it could be, I'm so thankful that mine it's 100% curable, 100% repairable, I should say. Doesn't mean that it doesn't happen again, but really, really watching and monitoring your stress levels is key for us women.
Agree. And so, for example, even I had a patient who had new onset hot flashes 5 years after menopause. Hot flashes don't generally just kind of start out of the blue once someone's been through the worst of it. And it turns out it was chest pain. Her hot flash was what was her sign that her heart was struggling to get enough blood going places. So she would, that was her sign. She had hot flashes when she'd walk to the mailbox. I'm like, that's not just a hot flash. And so she had a heart surgery 3 days later. So we really have to look for how women experience symptoms of heart attack different than men. And it's not all that crushing chest pain, but it's shortness of breath with exercise. It's exercise intolerance. It's a sense of claustrophobia and can't get enough air. So again, thank you for bringing that up, Vonnie. And I'm so glad that your blood vessels were clean. Again, I love that story in your book about that, because it's so true. And again, so glad that you would share that with us. So tip number 4, we have to change the conversation about mental health. And I'm learning even tonight. So, I appreciate that. Is there anything else you'd want to add to what we've talked about?
I just want to remind everyone, it's so simple and we can all do it. It costs nothing except take the word kill out of, take the word commit out, take the word crazy, insane, mental institution, all of those old words, they're stigmatized and they're outdated. Let's talk about the illness rather than the act. I cannot remind you enough about that. Take out the word commit, take out the word kill.
Thank you. I promise. And tip number 5, care for your mental health. Again, as we care for our physical bodies and we talk about healthy foods, at True, we talk about, I've got this t-shirt in my lap. We talk about, these t-shirts are now at True, but got seeds. And on the back, all of these 7 essential elements of daily success. And we're going to put the link up in the chat, is that you can click on it and go to the website and download the free seeds ebook. So we talk about caring for your mental health, and the seeds, a lot of you already know them. It's water, it's sleep. When you sleep, you make your brain chemicals, and our brain gets cleaned out, and the pathways that we're using, they get reinforced. And so if we can go to bed with positive thoughts and gratitude, those are more likely to be the pathways that are maintained. So sleep is important, drinking your water, exercise. I remember, I don't know if he's still doing it, but there's a therapist in town who does mental health therapy side by side on 2 treadmills. So the patient's on the treadmill and he's on the treadmill. And so, as we exercise, not only is it good for our physical health, but it's so good to treat anxiety. I don't know about you all, but when I exercise, I get off that bike and I'm like, I can take on the world. It just kind of cleans everything out. And so it's so important that we move. It's so important that we eat healthy foods, that we stay away from a lot of simple sugars that can create mood elevations. And it's so important that we take our vitamins for our mental and physical health. And it's so important that we do our gratitudes and and have that time for quiet time. So all of these seeds are really important, and they can be found in that Seeds ebook. Vonnie, how do you think about this in caring for your mental health?
Oh, absolutely. You are spot on. I think the only other two things that I would say is, really watch your alcohol consumption. Self-medicating is something that we hadn't talked about tonight, but it's often found with people that have anxiety and depression. So watch your alcohol consumption along with your caffeine intake, and make sure you drink enough water.
No, thank you. So important. Okay, so let's move into, these are the next 5 things I want to leave you with. These are 5 questions that I want you to be able to ask your healthcare provider. I love it when my patients come in to see me and they have a list, because that list makes sure that they leave and they've got their questions answered. When I see a patient, I always say, when you leave this appointment, what does success look like to you? What do you want to make sure we've got covered? This is about you. This isn't about me. So these are 5 questions that Vonnie and I hope that you ask your healthcare provider. So question number 1, what in my personal medical history could predict future mental health concerns? So it's to get that conversation going with your healthcare provider. From me, you've already heard postpartum depression, PMS, PMDD. These things definitely can predict, let's say, depression after menopause. If you have a history of, Vonnie, anything you want to add to this? Again, just depression, anxiety, obesity, all of these go together.
I think that what I would like to add is be honest. Be honest of your feelings. Don't hide behind, don't be ashamed if you're experiencing anxiety. You may not even realize that you have depression or anxiety. Talk to your doctor about it. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be ashamed.
No, I love that. And again, again, we have to challenge our healthcare providers. It might be a busy appointment and they're moving through the day quickly. It's okay to say, stop, time out. I need to know more about myself because I'm concerned about potential mental health issues. Okay, number 2, how does my family history impact my present and future mental health? So it's asking your doctor, how does my family history, and hopefully the next question is, tell me about your family history. Vonnie, tell me about family history. If was there more you wish you would have known about family history and things that you want to share, for example, that you shared with your children?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very concerned after my husband died because he was 4th generation. Why weren't we talking about that? Why didn't the doctor ask? We saw psychologists, we saw alcoholism, addiction, that runs in the family too. Why didn't we know that a family member was in treatment when we thought they were at a spa? So there's just so much hidden things that we need to know, because my kids are all prone to that, so again, right, be honest, ask your family, get the history. Autism, a lot of times we don't share that, my son has Asperger's. Who else in our family? That had to come from somewhere, usually, right? It's usually a genetic disposition.
Component. Yes.
So whatever your fate, whether somebody's struggling with an addiction issue, a anxiety, depression issue, find out, did you lose anyone to suicide? Was someone an alcoholic or addiction or an eating disorder? Those are really important things to tell your doctors if you're struggling with anything that could be related to those.
Exactly. And just like I have patients who say, I wish my grandma would have told me she had diabetes. I wish I would have known my aunt had a heart attack. I could have done things different, and now I had a heart attack. So if we can know things are coming, then we can put things into place before we go down that road, mental or physical health. Question number 3, where am I lacking in my personal care for mental health? So this is for you all to ask your doctor. You know me, you know what I do, you know my habits, we've talked about it. Where could I support myself better in mental health?
Yeah.
And so go ahead.
Yeah, I just think that it's so important that you also do that on your own. Let's self-love. Let's love ourselves enough to do what we need to do. I work 60 to 70 hours a week, I can't get out and walk as much as I want to, but I have a desk cycle underneath my desk and I can cycle, 10 miles a day while I'm working, so find something that works. And the sleep is so, so, so important. And just make sure that you're doing what you need to do so you can tell your doctor that, yes, I'm doing all of these things that you've asked me to do.
I love that. Okay, question number 4. If I'm noticing more anxiety and depression or danger signs, what do I do? I think we've talked about this a lot, but number 1, ask for help. Talk about it. And if the person you ask first doesn't get it, go all the way to your doctor if you need to, but ask for help and take care of self-care. A lot of times too, we have old traumas, old injuries, old things that maybe have, been way back in the background, or we haven't thought about it. And then something happens that triggers that emotion. Maybe it's a breakup with a boyfriend or girlfriend or a spouse, and that triggers old wounds that came maybe from a parent relationship or old abuse. And so it's when we start to feel those signs, it's to ask for help.
Absolutely. We need to talk about it, but first you have to recognize them within yourself. Don't sweep them under the rug. Really reach out for help, and don't be ashamed of whatever it is that you're dealing with, and recognizing that depression is real. Depression is an illness and it is treatable.
Thank you. That's profoundly true. Number 5. Again, this is for you to ask your healthcare provider, and I would want you to ask your healthcare provider, what will you do to help me as a healthcare provider if I have anxiety, if I have depression, if I'm starting to think dark and scary thoughts? What will you do to help me? What is the support? I can't call and be on hold for 3 hours. I'm going to give up. So what is my support? And I know, Vonnie, this is something close to your heart as well.
Yeah, again, it goes back to being honest with your doctor. Oftentimes now today they have the questionnaire that you fill out, 1 to 5, rate how your mental health is, how your anxiety, depression might be at this time. Well, I did a little sample. I put all, like, I'm not doing too well. I'm not doing well. And I did not get asked one question about my sheet where I said I wasn't doing well. Nothing was asked about my mental health. Now, if it really wasn't true, but me being me and doing what I do, I want to find out what our doctor's doing. So I was very disappointed that happened. And it goes back to advocating for yourself. You need to, if you want help is there. And whatever the doctor, whether they prescribe something for you, whether they tell you to meditate, or, tapping has become a huge technique for, I tap all the time when I get nervous. So, but they don't work unless you do them. You have to do them, and you have to advocate for yourself, even at your doctor's office.
Exactly. And it's to ask for those tools. And, it's true. We now have a therapist in-house. Ashley is amazing. And there's a lot of good counselors and therapists, trauma-informed therapists around town. Like, there is support. And again, it's getting rid of that stigma. I mean, I think everybody probably needs a therapist once or twice in their life, at least. I had an amazing therapist in the past, really helped me get through some hard times and understand things about my past that could have affected me, but by getting on top of it, I was able to get through it. It's really having and asking for that support when we need it, and it's knowing that is it a good fit with the healthcare provider that you've chosen. And I was at Spectrum and left, and I'd like to think, have really improved. There's a lot of conversation. There was a mandatory class on suicide prevention and anxiety and depression. I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. And it's true. We're all over it. And we really want to support people again in their mental and physical health. Helen Coy, love a therapist. I agree. We all support each other. And so, again, I really hope that, to me, this conversation, again, like I said in the beginning, this conversation was very powerful, and it's made a difference for me, and I hope that it's made a difference for all of you out there. I hope that you share this video with many people, and we can get a lot of traction from this in terms of help. Go to the True Women's Health website, and please go back, if you would, to the IunderstandLoveHeals.org. Again, Vonnie, thank you so much for starting this organization, for supporting this. Now, when we go to your website, tell me more about the pledge that you mentioned.
I'm sorry, tell me about
the pledge. Did you say that
the
there's
pledge. Okay, so we have a definition petition, and it's just signing it that you are with us on changing the conversation, changing the definition of suicide, so we can all start talking about suicide and mental health illnesses for what they are, and that is illness. But I do want to leave you with this. If you are struggling, if you need someone to talk to you, help is available 24/7 at 1-800-273-TALK. You don't have to go through this alone. And I promise you, your loved ones want you in their life, and their life is so much better with you in it than without it. So please reach out.
Oh, I just have shivers. Thank you so much, Vonnie. And I challenge everyone to go to her website and to take the pledge, and print it off, sign it, share that with all the people that you know. At True, we will be doing this, all going online and doing this. And I just challenge everyone to improve the conversation around all of our total body health. And at True, we want you to live your truth. So again, Vonnie, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I wish everyone stay safe, stay well. Thank you.
Thank you.